A very good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, whatever applicables according to the regions of the participants. This is Mariam Sayaf from Asian Council of Science Editors, and I will be moderating today's webinar on what's new in version 4, Principles of Transparency and Best Practices in Scholarly Publishing. I would like to thank all of the members and ACAC members and ambassadors, as well as the attendees who has joined us today for this informative webinar. Before starting towards the webinar, I would like to introduce the Asian Council of Science Editors. This is a non-profit council for industry professionals as well as publishing experts aiming at the advancement of Asian scholarly publishing community by promoting best publishing practices and disseminating useful information as well as latest industry tools and solutions among its members. Now, how the council works, our process is easy. We engage the scholarly publishing community of Asia, especially by providing different platforms of networking and learning, including annual meetings of ACAC, conferences, seminars, workshops, Editors Cafe, short courses, and events planned as part of capacity building program of ACAC, just like the webinar we are holding today. Secondly, we equip the community by providing the industry solutions according to their needs and provide them a platform where they can interact with our capable professionals and industry experts and share their current issues as well as explore their future challenges and their possible solutions. Now, I would like to share with you how ACAC is going in numbers nowadays. We have been serving around 500,000 plus members around the globe, out of which 37 are serving the council as lifetime members and 190 ambassadors all over the world. And we have 350 journal members, of which who are using ACAC services and guidelines. Next, I would like to share some initiatives and programs that Asian Council of Science Editors has introduced and launched till to date. The first one is ACAC's Editors Cafe. This is a regional chapter of the council that is built to access the need of regional editors. This is our regional event to interact with local editors, understand their regional needs and provide solutions accordingly. Next is Science One. This is a technological solution developed by ACAC, and I would like to discuss it further in my next slide. Also, ACAC's Reviewers Bank. This is another technical tool developed by ACAC to facilitate its journal members, and I will explain it in my next slide more briefly. Next is ACSTM, a product of the ACAC. This is a unique product where we provide a blend of academia and publishing sector to join hands, discuss their issues, providing researchers a platform to interact with journal publishers, librarians, as well as editors, and discuss their issues and resolve some of the challenges that they are facing in their daily routine. Next is ACAC's mentorship program. ACAC do offer mentorship programs to facilitate the early career researchers as well as early career editors to in a form of capacity building and help them boost their career in publishing as well as research. Another one, Index One, this is again a technical tool developed by ACAC, which I will explain in my next slide. And last is Trends in Scholarly Publishing. I am happy to share this is the very first journal launched by Asian Council of Science Editors last year. And we are hoping to provide a platform to Asian editors and researchers where they can publish their views, opinions, issues related to publishing and editing, scientific communication. Next, as I described earlier, this is one of Science One. cloud-based submission and peer review management system. The system was developed based on the needs of Asia and journals, publishers, and institutes that are working from Asia region. So this ideology behind providing Science One, this is a reliable and stable editorial system that is developed to facilitate the society journals, I would say, that have financial issues, as well as they don't know much about the technicalities of publishing world and Western culture. Next, I would like to share another technological solution that ACSE has developed. This is solely to serve the journal members of our council by providing recognized reviewers profile that we manage. As you can see on the screen, I enlisted some of the categories of which the council is managing recognized profiles of researchers that help our journal members in a peer review process. The last one is Index One, and this is an indexing database with an aim to give visibility and accessibility to the quality content or literature publishing from Asia, from less known society journals of Asia that are publishing quality research, but is not visible or accessible to the rest of the world, or is not indexed anywhere. Thank you. Now, here comes the introduction of Asian Council of Science Editor. And now I would like to move forward to invite the speakers for this webinar. What's new in version 4, considering the importance of principles of transparency and best practice in scholarly publishing guidelines defined by COPE in earlier versions. We have requested COPE Council members to join us today and brief us about what there is in version 4 for the editors and the publishing community. So our very first speaker is Trevor Lane. He is a COPE trustee and council member. Trevor is a publishing and education consultant based in Hong Kong and is currently a research enhancement and development consultant for the City University of Hong Kong. He holds an MA in biochemistry and chemical pharmacology and a PhD in physiological sciences from the University of Oxford. He was the managing editor of several general and specialist medical journals in Asia and the senior editors of 2 social sciences journals in the United States. He's also a member of Royal Society of Biology, the World Association of Medical Editors, the Institute of Scientific and Technical Communicators, and the International Association of Teachers of English as a Foreign Language. Moving forward towards our next speaker's introduction, I would like to welcome Jiayi. She has completed her master's degree in information technology management from Hong Kong Baptist University. She joined Chongqing University of Technology, China, as a managing editor of CAAI, Transactions on Intelligence Technology. She has started volunteering for a directory of open access journals in 2022 as associate editor. She is a member of youth community of the Society of China University Journal and council member of Chongqing Editology Society of Science Periodicals. I would like to invite both of our speakers, who are the COPE Council members, to Trevor Lane and Jiayi, to start the webinar accordingly. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'll share my screen. Hello, I'll share my screen and then check if the video is still working.
Yes.
Mariam, please let me know at any point if the video or the screen stops, and then I'll reset it.
Yes, it's fine right now.
Okay, good. So hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction and welcome to this webinar about the newest edition of the Principles of Transparency and Best Practice in Scholarly Publishing. Jiayi and I are both very happy to present on behalf of the Committee on Publication Ethics. And after this 40-minute talk, there'll be a chance to ask us questions or type in the question box so you can fully understand what's new in the revised principles and how to apply them if you're a journal editor or publisher. So again, here's a summary of our bios and affiliations. And I'm Trevor Lane, and I'm based in Hong Kong, and currently a research enhancement and development consultant for the City University of Hong Kong, and also a trainer for Springer Nature and Asia Edit. Jiayi is based in Chongqing and is the managing editor of CAAI Transactions on Intelligence Technology, and also volunteers for DOAJ, or the Directory of Open Access Journals. Today, I'll be giving a quick introduction of COPE's work, just in case some of you are unfamiliar with COPE or our COPE practices and the principles of transparency. Then Jiayi will give a point-by-point analysis of the changes from version 3 to version 4 of the principles before the Q&A session. Now, COPE is a UK-based non-profit group that turned 25 years old last year, and it's run by a few paid staff and 40 or so volunteers who are trustees or council members. COPE's 13,500 regular members are mostly journal editors, but also now universities and research institutes, and other individuals and companies, including author and journal support services. Now, we're not a regulatory body, but our wide membership from nearly 100 countries jointly promote publication ethics worldwide through support, education, and debate. Our mission is promoting integrity in scholarly research and its publication, and our 25th anniversary motto last year was creating a culture of publication integrity together. Now, that anniversary motto especially reflected the launch of the research institution membership last year, because it takes a concerted joint effort to uphold the integrity of the world's scholarly literature. For the university policy and training side, there's setting research hypotheses or directions, treatment of research participants, gathering data or information, analysis and interpretation, reporting of methods and results, and making the findings available. On the publication side, there's developing editorial policies, managing the publication process, making editorial decisions, and investigating and taking action to maintain and correct the scholarly record, and preserving the scholarly record. And applicable to both are the requirements for honesty, scrupulous care in conducting the research, analysis, and reporting, transparency, care and respect for participants, colleagues, animals, the environment, and stewardship of scholarship for future generations. And COPE, with its different types of membership, offers a practical platform for multiple stakeholders to cooperate to create a culture of publication integrity together. We do this through various activities. We hold a quarterly online forum for members to discuss current anonymized ethics cases, with over 600 case summaries publicly available on the website publicationethics.org. We offer flowcharts, guidelines of formal policy documents, and community discussions and discussion documents on emerging issues. So actually there is a forum coming up in March for members, and we, apart from anonymized cases that we'll discuss, there will be a brief discussion at the beginning about AI, generative AI, and publishing. So if you're a COPE member, please do join our next forum and forum discussion in March. We also offer webinars, and for members, there's seminars. And as we'll see today, we are the co-producers of the principles of transparency and best practice in scholarly publishing. And for members, there's an e-learning course and a journal audit. Now, COPE members must abide by the 10 COPE core practices to do with publication ethics. The COPE core practices replaced the COPE codes of conduct in 2017, and they are high-level principles for journals to create their own codes of conduct and regulations and guidelines. But the core practices aren't intended just for COPE members. They're a guide for promoting the integrity of the scholarly record in general. Now, in alphabetical order, these core practices are to have clear processes to deal with allegations of misconduct and clear policies on authorship and non-author contributorship. I won't read these all out, as the full text can be found on the COPE website at publicationethics.org. Policies are also needed for handling complaints and appeals and conflicts of interest or competing interests of all parties. Journals need policies on data availability and reproducibility and ethical oversight of research and publishing practices. There's also intellectual property issues and the ethics of journal management and operations. Finally, journal policies are needed on peer review processes and post-publication discussions and corrections. As I said, the core practices aren't recommendations just for COPE members, but for all stakeholders in academic publishing worldwide. Those 10 core practices are related to the 16 principles of transparency and best practice in scholarly publishing, which are co-produced by COPE, DOAJ, or Directory of Open Access Journals, OASPA, or Open Access Scholarly Publishing Association, and WAME, or WAMI, or the World Association of Medical Editors, which I'm also a member of, and the fourth version of September last year replaced the third version of 2018, and I was involved in the revision for the third version, but not the latest update. Now, in the fourth version, the 16 principles have been clarified and reformatted with bullet points, and some shalls have been revised to shoulds. A few more requirements have been added, and they've been rearranged into 4 themes of journal content, journal practices, organization, and business practices. And because of publishing developments, in the 4 years since the third version, more details were added about author fees, peer review, open access, and diversity and inclusivity. The 16 principles promote quality and trustworthy publication of journals, but also supplements and special issues and conference proceedings, and they apply to all open access and subscription journals of all disciplines, not just the members of the 4 named organizations. Jiayi will go through each principle in a moment, but the summary points are: for journal content, a journal's name is unique, the website protects users and has high professional standards, the publishing schedule is clear and kept to in practice, preservation of the journal content is clearly indicated, copyright terms for published content are clear, licensing information is in the policy and on published articles. For journal practices, publication ethics policies are available, the peer review policy is clear, and charges or registration required for access to articles are clear to readers. For organization, journals clearly state ownership and management. Editorial board members are experts in the journal subject area, and journals provide contact information and full editor details. And for business practices, any charges relating to manuscripts are clear to authors. Journals clearly state all revenue sources. Journals have a transparent advertising policy, and marketing to authors is appropriate, targeted, and unobtrusive. So the 16 principles of transparency basically apply to the practical running of all publications, whereas the 10 COPE core practices focus on ethical aspects for all stakeholders in research and scholarly publishing. And both help to distinguish trustworthy publications from predatory or deceptive ones. Now, if we superimpose the COPE core practices onto the principles of transparency, we see that journal content principles correspond to COPE's core practices on intellectual property and journal management. There's some overlap with others. For example, for Principle 2, websites should transparently show all journal information and policies for authors and readers, including peer review model and authorship criteria. The principles on journal practices cover all COPE core practices by cross-referencing 8 of the 10 COPE core practices shown in the purple box and listing them in the principle number 7 on publication ethics. The COPE core practice number 9 on peer review is a separate principle number 8, and as we saw, COPE practices of journal management and intellectual property could cover multiple principles here in principle 9 on reader access to content. In fact, the two COPE core practices 7 and 8 on intellectual property and journal management also cover the 3 principles of ownership, advisory body, and editorial team. And they also apply to the 4 principles on business practices, on author fees, revenue sources, advertising, and marketing. Now, looking at the 2 guidelines the other way around, again, we see that most of the COPE core practices offer more detail of principle of transparency number 7 that listed items on publication ethics. Whereas understandably, most of the 16 principles or PTB, PSP in the gray boxes expand the details of COPE's core practices 7 and 8 on intellectual property and journal management. Peer review, being the main feature of peer-reviewed publications, is COPE core practice number 9, as well as a separate principle of transparency number 8. So the 2 sets of guidelines are fully harmonized and complement each other while focusing on different aspects. And to be listed in COPE, journals need to prove they fulfill both the COPE core practices and the principles of transparency. So I'd now like to pass the presentation over to Jiayi, who will discuss the specific changes made in version 4 of the Principles of Transparency. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Trevor. I'm sharing my slides. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Jiayi on behalf of COPE. In the following times, I'm going to talk about the differences between version 3 and version 4. Let's get started. The third version of Principles of Transparency and Best Practice in Scholarly Publishing is published in January 2018, and the fourth version is published in September 2022. We can see there are 16 principles for version 3, and for version 4, the number of principles is not changed. There are still 16 items. But the principles of version 4 are classified into 4 categories: journal content, journal practices, organization, and business practices. So we can see some differences. The order of some items is changed. Copyright and the license got divided into 2 items. identification of and dealing with allegation of misconduct, and the publication ethics got combined into one item with a new name, publication ethic, and the related editorial practices. I think the framework of version 4 is more clear. The next part, I would introduce what's new in the content. I use the yellow to highlight the newly added section. In the part of introduction, version 3 is mainly used to form the basis of the criteria by which suitability for membership is assessed by COPE, DOAJ, OASPA, and part of the criteria on which membership applications are evaluated by WAME. So the version 4 is different. It encourages the files wide dissemination. All published content, including special issues and the conference proceedings, should apply it. Where practices deviate from the standards outlined, editors must transparently communicate the procedures and the journal's photos. These principles also acknowledge that publishers and editors are responsible for promoting accessibility, diversity, equity, and inclusivity in all aspects of the publication. As we know, currently improving the DEIA in our publishing industry have become a standard among many organizations. Therefore, the principles mentioned that editorial decisions should be based on scholarly merit. They shouldn't be affected by the origins of the manuscript, including the nationality, ethnicity, political beliefs, race, or religion of the authors. Journals should ensure no policies create an exclusionary environment for anyone wanting to engage with the journal, and should regularly assess their policies for inclusivity. Move to next part, version 4 added not mislead potential authors and readers about the journal scope or associate with other journals organizations. For the part of website, version 4 added the technical requirements for websites. Websites should be properly supported and maintained, with particular attention given to security aspects that help protect users from viruses and malware. As a minimum, websites should use HTTPS and not HTTP, and all traffic should be redirected through HTTPS. Furthermore, the new version mentioned the website should declare an acknowledgement to the source website if any text is copied from another website. Proper quotation is needed. We see the new color blue. It highlights the sentences are paraphrased. The version 4 specifies that the readership what mentioned in version 3 means target readership. We should know that not everyone is our journal's target reader. And the version 4 underlines journal website should display the types of manuscripts that the journal will consider for publication. For the part of publishing schedule, version 4 emphasizes the journal must publish on time. The next part is archiving. Version 4 explains the term preservation in version 3 is defined as long-term digital preservation. Keeper's registry is a new example about journal's plan for electronic backup and the preservation of access to the journal content. As mentioned before, the section of copyright and licensing in version 3 got divided into two items in new version. Actually, lots of persons think copyright and license are same thing. In version 4, it's easy to recognize they are totally different. This part includes all types of copyright, like journal website copyright, article copyright, journal copyright. So the new version requested the copyright terms should be separate and distinct from the copyright of the website. And if the copyright terms are described in a separate form, this should be easy to find on the website and available to all. This slide shows the example that the copyright terms should be separate and distinct from the copyright of the website. The first picture indicates the journal copyright, and this picture shows the journal website copyright. When we browse the journal website, this information should be easy to find. Move to next part is license. Version 4 present open access content must use an open license. In this slide, I use these two screenshots to show how to indicate the copyright holder and the licensing term on the full text of published articles. This is a HTML page, and this is a PDF page. The next part is publication ethics and the related editorial policies. The new version mentioned the COPE's co-practice guidance as example for policies on publication ethics. The policies about how to handle allegations of research misconduct and retractions are added in version 4. In addition, new version requested editors and publishers should ensure they outline their policies and procedures for handling issues of publication ethics when they arise. Any allegation of research misconduct should be aware not only of the published papers, but also of the submitted papers. Moving to next part, version 4 considers the specific elements of peer review may differ by journal and disciplines. So who conducts the peer review should be clearly stated on website. For example, external experts or editorial board members. Some examples of policies related to the peer review procedures are provided. Use of author recommended reviewers, any masking of identities, and if so, who is masked and to whom, whether or not supplementary material is subject to peer review, whether or not reviews are posted with articles, whether or not reviews are signed or anonymized, how a decision about a manuscript is ultimately made and who is involved, any exceptions to the peer review process, such as specific article types that don't undergo peer review. If an article's peer review is an exception to the UU policy, the article should state what review it received. Statements of peer review times should be supported by published timeframes on accepted papers. In the event of delays, authors should be informed of the reason for the delay and given the opportunity to withdraw their manuscripts if they wish. This is an example to show how to display the date of submission, acceptance, and publication with all published research. Next is a part of access. The new file lists the X methods in details, including the offline versions. For the part of ownership and management, version 4 requested that if a journal is affiliated with a society, institution, or sponsor, links to their website should be provided where available. Generally, the journal advisory body is editorial boards. It's critically important for journals. The subjects array of editorial board members must be related to journals' aims and scope. To avoid being associated with predatory or deceptive journals, the list should be up to date and members must agree to serve. Journals should particularly review their boards to ensure it's still relevant and appropriate. For the part of editorial team and the contact information, the mailing address should be displayed on journal website. For author fees, more details are given in new version. The author fees are not limited to article processing charges, but also include page charges, editorial processing charges, language editing fees, color charges, submission fees, membership fees, or other supplementary charges. These fees should be clearly stated on the website. If the journal is like to implement author charges in the future, this should be stated. If waivers are available for author fees, this information should be stated clearly. Waiver information should include who is eligible for a waiver, which authors of the group must be eligible for the waiver to apply, when and how to apply for a waiver. Author fees or waiver status shouldn't influence editorial decision making, and this should be clearly stated. This picture shows how to clearly state waivers and discounts. For the part of revenue, special issues, reprint income, supplements, and sponsorships are added to the examples of business models or revenue sources. Move to next part, version 4 requested journals should state whether they accept advertising. If the journal doesn't accept advertising, it still needs state on website. In order to encourage the principles wide dissemination, the last paragraph in version 3 is deleted. Thanks for listening and attention. I hope you have found today's webinar is useful. You can find Trevor and my email by here, and you can contact us if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jiayi. Just give me a minute to compile the question and I will redirect to you. Hi, Jiayi and Trevor. I have sent one question to the chat box if it's available with you.
Yes, I see the question.
I have sent one question. We are receiving a number of questions. Would it be appropriate for both of you if I send one by one the questions in chat box?
Mariam, I'd suggest that you choose relevant questions and speak them out, and then we can answer them.
Yes, Trevor, I am picking the questions that are relevant. As you can check in the chat box, this is related to copyright and OA. So I will only pick that is relevant to the presentation. So to make it quick, because we are receiving the questions meantime. So if it's appropriate for both of you, I will send one by one the question in chat room for both of you just.
Okay, I think I can answer the question you sent to me. Maya, do you send me the question about the OA publication copyright agreement?
Yes.
Yeah, I can answer this question first. I suggest we can read the Creative Commons. It's a typical open access copyright agreements. Let me check. The open access publication copyright, what's the difference between the OA copyright agreement and between the subscription journal agreement? I think the main difference is how to share the the article to the audience, to the readers. The open access copyright, we have 6 types of the Creative Commons agreements, and each of them are different. But the main difference between them and the subscription agreement is the open access allows the readers free to download, free to use, but the subscription agreement is different. It asks the writers, the authors, is free for authors, but the users want to read the subscription contents. You need to pay. You need to pay the fees, and all the agreement will state clearly for this issue. I think this is the main differences.
Thank you, Jiayi. I'd like to add, so the question is, what's the difference between copyright agreement and OA, open access? And in theory, OA, or as Jiayi said, the Creative Commons licenses or CC licenses were meant to be an alternative to copyright to allow not just readership, but also onward use and research using the material without always having to ask the authors or the copyright owner, but there are different licenses, so there are different terms and conditions. But over time, it's become separated so that actually copyright is who owns the intellectual property of that document and its content versus who can use it later on, not just reading, but also reproducing it, citing it, using the data in it. So as I said, those are stipulated in the special CC Creative Commons licenses. So it's become independent. And so you can have cases where traditionally you continue signing over copyright of the article to the journal or publisher or society, but then have a different level of license for the users to use the work later on. And as we said, at least free for reading, but then there are other things they can do with the document, to a spectrum of where the authors can keep the copyright, but release it with an OA license of a special type, but then allow the journal to publish under some other agreement. Either that agreement, it won't be like a traditional copyright transfer. Either the publisher or journal publishes under an OA license itself, but the authors keep the copyright, or they sign something else special, like an exclusive or non-exclusive license to publish as the first publisher of the work. So there might be other conditions applied, like embargoes and what version the author can use themselves, what version they can upload, what version they can reproduce or use for free. So it's become separated, and you'll see, Jiayi can correct me if I'm wrong because she's a representative of DOAJ. The DOAJ, Directory of Open Access Journals, allows indexing of open access journals under different flavors, and but the pure original definition of OA is where the authors keep the copyright. That's why the DOAJ will give their special gold seal. Is that right, Jiayi?
Yes, I agree with you. Hi, Trevor. I found two questions about the journal review. Can you say the two questions, question 2 and question 3?
The question to Jiayi, it is about, is there any body that regulates the article processing charges of journals as APCs are steadily increasing?
Sorry that I don't know. Is there is anybody regulates the APC?
Okay, moving to the next question. It is, what information should be included with regards to revenue sources by the journal?
So Jiayi, I can, I'll try to answer both of those ones, and then you can step in. From your experience as a current managing editor of a journal, so you're correct. There's no international body that controls APCs, just like there's no international body that will control the price of something. So there's no fixed journal price, subscription price, access price. It's not like Apple company where they do have an agreed worldwide price and then they convert it to different currency rates. So it's not like a company with a product that tries to keep the price around the world the same. So that's why authors have to do their homework and see what's fair, choose their target journal carefully. It shouldn't be by price, but it should be by what is the best target journal, what's the best readership, the performance of the journal, how trustworthy it is from the content, whether it's the subject area that matches them. But of course, as we know, the APCs and fees are also going to be a factor, and then that's why you should be able to apply for discounts and waivers. There should be that mechanism there. So this is the one of the reasons why you may have heard of Plan S in Europe, where the Plan S movement is not trying to fix the price, but trying to make it fairer and transparent. So they're encouraging, so this is related to question 3, they're encouraging journals that do charge an APC for authors to publish open access to be transparent. What is the fee for? And they have to kind of argue and show evidence or justify the price, why it's so high, for example. So that's one thing they're trying to push, is to show transparency of what you get for, what you pay for. And so for question 3, what else should they show? What else should journals show as revenue sources? That's covered by any of the principles of transparency about author fees and reader fees, but also number 14, the other revenue. So business models or revenue sources should be clearly stated on the journal's website. They should include author fees, subscriptions, sponsorships and subsidies, advertising, reprints, supplements, or special issues. And business models or revenue sources, for example, reprint income, supplements, special issues, and sponsorships, should not influence editorial decision making. So the 2 points there are state where your sources come from. There's no rules there saying the actual amounts. So I think that's, I don't think that's a standard yet, but actually, at least the model or the source, the business model or the sources should be transparent. And linked to that last sentence is that whatever business model or revenue sources you do choose, it shouldn't influence editorial decision making. So it's got to be a separate activity. So I think those high level principles are just to guide what to do and try to do the business practices as ethically as possible to for its own sake, but also to not influence the content of the journal. So there's no bias, conflicts of interest, or profiteering. So it's the wrong purpose of an academic journal. So state as clearly and as transparently as you can what different types of sources there are. Especially these days, you may have heard of lots of retractions in supplements and special issues. So supplements and special issues, we're saying, are like the journal. It's not a special money-making add-on venture. So it's as important as the journal itself.
Thank you, Trevor. Jiayi, would you like to add something to the question, or should we move to the next one?
Yeah, we can move to the question 4. COPE provides the e-learning service on our website. These courses is designed for editors and publishers who want to improve your understanding on publication ethics, and the e-learning is providing the tools and the knowledge needed to address the many issues you face when editing a journal. So I think you can use the e-learning service on COPE website to check whether your journal are following the COPE guidelines.
So I'll read out question 4 for people who don't have the chat. So is there any tool for the editor or members of COPE to check whether their journal are compliant with the guidelines? So either that's going to be the COPE core practice guidelines, which I said are quite umbrella, high level guidelines. That's why it replaced the codes of conduct, because we're not just it's not just a list of things that you check off and tick off and say, yes, we do that. It's meant to be guidelines to tell your journal to be serious about your own guidelines and to create your own codes of conduct, because there's too many journal types, business models, peer review types, disciplines, and subject types. There's different things that different disciplines do, that you can't have one set of guidelines and say, if you follow it, you're a COPE member. That doesn't make sense for publishing ethics and the integrity of the scholarly record, which is so wide and diverse. And so for COPE's guidelines, which are quite general, and then we saw the 16 principles of transparency, again, they're quite general, although they give more detail in the day-to-day running and the business practices of a journal. So the COPE ones are generally about publication ethics and the scholarly record, and the 16 principles are quite specific for journals and supplements and conference proceedings. They're more for publishers. As I said, COPE is expanding its membership for other stakeholders, because it's not just the journal itself. We need other stakeholders, publishing support companies, universities, research institutions. So we'll revise the COPE core practices to include them too in the future. But at the moment, the guidelines are geared towards journals. But yes, members of COPE have to show that they adhere to both sets of guidelines. As Jiayi said, the principles are the common guidelines between those 4 organizations. Partly they use them for membership entry, but it's not such a simple story. So that's not the whole entry criteria. But we will each have our own checklists and procedures for membership entry. So for that, you already have to show you follow those 16 principles. And then for COPE, we look for evidence that you do follow all of the 10 core practices. As we saw, they're very specific about the publication ethics side, which was only one of the principles in the principles of transparency, and there's some overlap with the others. So the membership process itself will look for the evidence, and then the form, the application form, and then you can contact the administrator and they'll let you know what information to provide and how to prove that you do follow each of those principles. And again, the whole point is it's not a checkbox that you say, oh, I do it, and here's a website or a web page. You have to show that you're doing those things. So as Jiayi showed, there will be examples, visible examples of whether you follow the principles or the COPE core practices actually in your content and on your website and in your articles and PDFs. So that's the main thing, that the membership committees of each organization will already be looking for things. And so you have to pass that test first. And then, of course, as we saw, we had the new version of the principles, version 4, because the standards change, the publishing landscape changes quite quickly. And so we have to keep updating. So even if there are members listening who use the old principles, version 3, do make sure you update and follow version 4. You should be doing it anyway, but we're just spelling it out in black and white. So double check that you're following and visibly following those guidelines. And again, for the 4 different member societies, it wouldn't just be provide a checklist and say that you follow them. For COPE, we need you to be publishing for at least a year to show that you have put them into practice. Otherwise, it's too easy to just say, oh, we look at our website, we follow things. So we have to make sure you do follow it, and we'll look for evidence for that. And then Jiayi mentioned the e-learning course for members, and then also for members, there's an audit document. So that's in the members only area. Again, those are based on the principles and the 10 COPE core practices, and divides them into finer points for you to check that you're following those good practices. Again, in order to have good evidence, visible evidence that you're following the guidelines. So there is an audit document on the members only sub website of the COPE website. So do look for that if you're a COPE member.
Thank you, Trevor. A majority of the questions that we are receiving now that are, I think, related to the presentation. And once we update the video of the webinar, it will be much more clear about what's new in the version 4 and about peer review process and what segments have been revised to now. So there is just one last question that is from our ACAC backend team. As during the processing of this webinar application process, we were surprised that the majority of the participants, it's new for them that the version has been revised and they are not well aware about the version 4 of the guidelines. So apart from the members of COPE, do COPE is providing some platforms to promote and disseminate this information for non-members too?
Yes, the 4 different societies that wrote the guidelines are, because they only appeared online at the end of last year. So that will be on the engagement agenda of the different societies to start promoting them. But of course, it's more important to promote them for membership for the societies, but then the wider engagement and outreach to have them disseminated more widely. Of course, that's going to be an activity that we're all pursuing. And for people who are interested, who are serious about it anyway, would look for the societies that they want to join, whether it's DOAJ or COPE or WAMI, WAME, or AWASPA. So then if you look for those societies, you will see the standards that they expect you to live up to. And then, of course, you'd know what the criteria are and what the principles are. So if non-members look for those websites, they'll find it. But also for COPE especially, we're encouraging that our materials, which are in the public site, not the members-only site, will be accessible. And so there's a sign-up mail list, email list, to get the bi-monthly newsletter, to stay in touch with the publishing community and what's happening. So we send that newsletter for non-members as well. So as many stakeholders as possible can be reached. And of course, then we promote the guidelines there, as well as other things happening in the publishing field. So non-members are very welcome to sign up. And also thank you to ACSE for also helping us to disseminate more widely that there's a new version of the principles of transparency.
Thank you, Trevor and Jiayi, for an excellent presentation. And I would say, I must say this was very informative regarding a very clear description and line between version 3, what it was before, and what the committee and the 4 of the organization have modified in this version. But I must say that it took a lot of effort in revising version 4. And it will take much more effort in implementation of these guidelines by the publishing society, because the outcome comes when the publishers or the communities for what the guidelines have been designed, they start implementing it. So from ACSE platform, we will try to disseminate these guidelines as much as possible from the COPE guidelines, the website link. We will try to disseminate it among our members, and especially the attendees who are asking for the where they can access these guidelines. So we will share the link. Also, we will disseminate this video recording of webinar. I think how Trevor explained different aspects, how version 4 facilitate the publishing workflow, and Jiayi too. So this will be very much fruitful for the members to understand version 4 and its implementation. And we would be happy to disseminate this effort of WASPA, WAM, DOAJ, and COPE in Asia region and wherever the ACSE members are. So in the concluding session, I would like to request all of the attendees to please put your cameras on so that we can take a few pictures for a memory, and accordingly, we will move to our closing ceremony. Please put your cameras on, be in an appropriate situation. If you are not using the background, you can blur your backgrounds and be in appropriate position so that the ACSE team can take the pictures and we can use it further. We have about 5 Zoom screens, so you have to stay with me to check on which screen which person comes. So on count of 1, I'm going to take the first screenshot. Smile. Okay, moving to the next one. Just a minute. Okay, so the second slide, a few of the members, their cameras are still not open. Please put your cameras on so that we can take the picture. On count of 1, smile. Just another screen to go. Smile. Just one more. So thank you so much for all of the participants, as well as the speakers. Jiayi and Trevor, thank you for taking out time for this webinar and sharing the information on version 4 of Principles of Transparency and Best Practices. I hope this will be a good resource for the attendees as well as the ACSC members. We will share the YouTube link among all of the attendees. Also, I will request the management team to email the link of the guidelines of COPE website so that all of you can get to know about the version 4 directly from the source of COPE website. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, bye,
Bye.
bye.